Dunkles Bock is a dark German lager originating from the city of Einbeck in northern Germany and made popular by Munich brewers in the 17th century. It can be a fussy style to brew, but Brülosophy contributor Will Lovell has thrown the rulebook out the window, brewing a Dunkles Bock Short and Shoddy style. What would 20 unsuspecting tasters think of Will's beer? Let's find out. This episode is sponsored by Delta Brewing Systems. More on them in a bit. Will, Dunkles Bock, I'm speaking to the expert here, I believe, because you spent some time living in Germany?
Well, for the shame of it all, I'm sure I had a Dunkles Bock somewhere along the way. I'm sure some point in time when my time in Germany, I got to drink this fabulous style. But me remembering what it was or when or where, I honestly don't know. So unfortunately, I don't remember drinking any Dunkles Bock in Deutschland. We were many hours away from the region where this was the most popular, so that's not totally surprising. But in the same token, it's for the shame of it all. I don't really remember drinking any of it.
You know, the style, though, sounds great. Malty, dark lagers, German lagers, that's really right up my alley. And the BJCP lists this as a strong, dark, malty German lager beer that emphasizes the malty rich and somewhat toasty qualities of continental malt without being sweet in the finish. So that was the guide that you were working from. So talk me through how you came up with your recipe for this beer.
Well, like all innovation, it comes from the simplest of things. And so I got an order that I put in for your imperial yeast. And then suddenly there was this one yeast packet I don't remember ordering called Que Bueno. And I just kind of looked at it, I was like, well, you know, what can I do with this that would be kind of interesting and different? And I'm like, you know what? I've made a delicious Vienna lager, which is also a nice, delicious amber lager with Que Bueno before. So what would it do in a Dunkles Bock? And so really that kind of question turned around in my head. And so then we kind of went from the yeast and worked on out from there.
Now, tell me a little bit about the actual recipe, the malt bill that you went with to brew this beer.
It's not really that innovative. I mean, these kind of lagers aren't totally crazy. So had a pretty good charge, about roughly 69% Munich 1. That was kind of the majority of my base malt. I also had about 26 or so percent Pilsner malt, 4 or so percent Cara Munich malt, and then just a smattering for color, probably just a little bit, about 2 ounces of roasted barley, just to round it out and get a little bit more of color that I was going for.
Now let's go through your brew day with that mash. So this is a short and shoddy brew day. That means we are taking a number of shortcuts along the way, which you might not necessarily associate with brewing a German lager. It's something you would do quickly. So tell me about how the mash worked and how you got the water ready and so forth.
Oh man, so I like brewing in the morning. That's my favorite thing in the world to do. Just kind of have everything ready to go. So literally, I just kind of woke up. I already had the water kind of there, and so I went ahead and collected all my filtered RO water, added all my salts, flipped the switch, and got everything heated up on my Delta all-in-one brewing system, and then kind of went back inside and got a cup of coffee. After that, I came back out, weighed out all my grains, milled them. After the water was properly heated, which is, usually after I flip the switch on the system, it takes roughly 45 minutes or so for the water to get heated. I went ahead and mashed in at about 152 degrees Fahrenheit, and my intention was to do about a 30-minute mash on this particular brew day. And while it was mashing, I went ahead and weighed out my hop additions. And so for the hops on this one, the goal was to use basically a 23-gram charge of Northern Brew at the 30-minute mark. The Northern Brew I had was really nice because it had a 10% alpha acid, so it was a little bit higher alpha acid for bittering, which is really nice for these short and shotties. And then I was going to do about a 30-gram charge of Hersbruck at the 15-minute mark, just to kind of add in a little bit of complexity. And then at the end of 30 minutes, cooled it all off. Got it down to roughly my groundwater temperature, which I can get it down to about 85, 90 degrees, no problem. And then I'll move it over into my Delta Firm tanks, in which it always seems silly when you talk about short and shoddy and you have a glycol system. But once they're in to the Delta Firm tank, I'll turn on the glycol, cool them down the rest of the way. At the end of it, I looked at it, and my OG was right around 1063. I used my Milwaukee Tools refractometer to kind of calculate the pounds of bricks and then convert it over. And then after that, everything was cooled off, pitched the yeast. And so grand total brew day, I started at about 9:45, finished up at about 11:30. So not too bad for a brew day on a 110 system.
So I'm trying to keep count of all the brewing rules you've broken at this point. So
Well, we haven't talked about fermentation temperature. Do you need to talk about that too, or?
did you break some more rules there, Will?
I did. I think I actually pitched my yeast when it was at like 77F, and then I fermented at 66. So there we go. More rules broken.
Okay, all right. I'm losing track. So this super short mash, which is really not recommended for this sort of style of beer.
Oh, it should have been probably a 90-minute mash, I'm pretty sure, to get that maximum fermentability, get everything moving really smooth. I'm pretty sure that was it. And then you need a lot of probably a 90-minute boil, get all that DMS to go out. But instead, nope, throw caution to the wind, 30 and 30.
And then you fermented warm as well, just to pile on.
Well, and what's great too is Que Bueno is actually one of the yeasts that Brülosophy's done experiments on with temperature, and it's come back significant. So even with the significant result, I threw caution to the wind and still fermented it at 66F.
Well, we'll get into the results from the participants in a moment, but just from a visual perspective, how did this beer end up looking?
Well, as I look at the hydrometer sample here, like the hydrometer sample when I got to FG was a bit murky, honestly. Like if you look at it, it's got a lot of kind of stuff floating around. But after it gets cold crashed and kegged and let sit for, a few days, honestly, if you look at the picture of this finalized beer, that's a nice, bright, beautiful, darkish, ambery color beer. It looks like a real beauty of a beer, honestly.
It really does. And did it ferment down to where you were expecting in terms of final gravity?
It got to 1016. I think that was right around where I was expecting. But again, imperial yeast, I've never had too many, if any, problems of it getting down to where I need it to be, especially doing this warm. Obviously, we always say, well, lager yeast likes cold temperature. Well, not really. It just tolerates it. So we put lager yeast in cold temperature because it tolerates it. I think all yeast likes to reproduce in warmer temperatures. In fact, it does it way better in warmer temperatures. So now whether or not you get the flavors profile that you want in a warmer temperature, that's a different story. But I think yeast, as far as reproduction are concerned, really like it warmer. So I'm not surprised that it got down to where I wanted it to be, because 1016 was right around where I expected it to go.
Well, you took this attractive looking beer to a number of participants. I think 20 participants tasted this beer, and we surveyed them on how this turned out. Before we get to that, a quick word on today's sponsor, which is Delta Brewing Systems. Now, Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on stainless steel brewing gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a dome lid to reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 2 psi pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Okay, so Will, you were using Delta Brewing Systems for this beer. We then gave this beer to a number of participants, had them fill in a survey. Let's talk about what they thought. And the first question is related to the characteristic of the beer.
Right. So we have them rated whether they think it's a hoppy, malty, or a dry and attenuated beer. And, this one, the most people picked, and I think it was the predominant characteristic was malty, which is, I would agree, this is very much a malt-forward beer. A handful of people, the second most was dry and attenuated. And then the fewest was hoppy. And in my opinion, if you saw me list off the hops used earlier, this was not really meant to be a hoppy beer. This is definitely a malt-forward beer, in my opinion. And that's what most people pick. So I think on that note of making a malty Dunkles Bock, we achieved it.
Hoppy or no, we then do ask, what hop characteristics are you picking up on? And there's not a none answer. So what did people say for this?
Well, we avoided berry, dank caddy, and onion garlic. So... whew, not every day I get to do that in a short and shoddy beer. So I'm very thankful for that. But the overwhelming majority, 11 tasters, picked earthy, and that was the top pick. Now, on down the list from that with 3 apiece was spicy, and then 3 for pine resinous. And then you get, one person picked fruity, one person picked floral, one person picked melon. I don't know. I don't think it was a very hop forward beer, and I don't think many people rated it as such. So that makes sense to me that you might just go with earthy as kind of a default.
That makes sense to me as well. Piney, resinous, I don't know, but you know,
You got to
people
pick
pick what they
something.
pick. Right, exactly. Okay, but of more interest, I think, for this beer was the malt characteristics.
Yes. So 14 of the 20 tasters picked toasty. So I think that's great. I think the next one down the list was 4 people picked nutty. One person picked caramel sweet, and then one person picked roast. And, I kind of like it. I did think it had kind of I probably would have mentioned caramel toffee, but it definitely had a nutty, toasty characteristic to it as well. So I think all these are kind of starting to line up and really shaping up to show that this was probably getting pretty close to what we're going for here. It's looking good.
And then the final characteristic we ask about is yeast characteristics.
Yeah, so yeast is one of those things where, depending on who your tasters are, and I did take this to a homebrew club meeting with San Antonio Cerveceros, so quite a few experienced tasters, but the majority of tasters, 8 of them said that it was clean. 6 people claimed to pick out some esters, 4 claimed to pick out phenolics, and 2 people claimed to pick out some sulfur. So overall, I don't know. It doesn't ask them to what intensity or variability they got all these things, but obviously, while the majority said clean, there were a few people in there that seemed to pick up something else.
Now, many of our experiments, we don't tell participants the style of beer that they're consuming if we're testing a variable or something like that. But for Short and Shoddy, we do. In fact, we give them the BJCP description so they know exactly what the style is supposed to be. And then we ask them the question of how representative is this beer of the style. So keep in mind all of the shortcuts that you took in this super quick brew day. Did you brew an authentic Dunkles Bock?
Well, I didn't do it in Einbeck, so it couldn't be that authentic. But according to tasters, I guess the majority of people, 12 out of 20, gave it a 4 out of 5. So to me, that's like pretty resoundingly awesome. There was 4 tasters that gave it a 5 out of 5, which I think is very flattering. Thank you so much. And then 4 tasters gave it a 3 out of 5. So not too bad. No 0, 1, or 2 out of 5s. It was all 3, 4, and 5, with the majority being a 4 out of 5. And so I will take that.
I think that's phenomenal. That's got to be one of our higher scoring Short and Shoddies.
That's my goal. Be the highest scoring short and shoddy person ever. That's my goal every day.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do also have a highest scoring Short and Shoddy record personally, which was for most off flavors. But, we do what we can.
We break records wherever we can, Martin. We break records wherever we can.
We do. Right. Now, the final question that we ask is, regardless of whether you think it's a Dunkles Bock or not, did you like it? So what did people think in terms of preference?
Well, I don't really care what they think because I thought it was a great beer. But if we do care what people think, again, 4 out of 5, 8 out of 20 tasters picked that one. Next up was, 6 out of 20 tasters picked 5 out of 5. And then the one behind that was, 5 tasters picked 3 out of 5. So the majority of our tasters, all but one taster, thought it was at least a 3 out of 5 or better. We had one taster that gave it a 2 out of 5. Maybe they're just not a fan of dark lagers or lager in general, or maybe they don't even like beer. I'm not really sure what's going on here. But I think we have a lot of people that really like this beer and thought that it was at least a fair representation of the style. So I think absolutely alles gut. We got this one. I think we did a pretty good job with this one.
Well, I'm very pleased for the participants, but really, they get a little sample. You have whatever's left in the keg to consume after that. So how did you enjoy the beer? Did this come out well in your opinion?
What I will say is this beer did not last long. It started going pretty fast. This is kind of a favorite around the house. My wife was hitting it pretty hard. I was hitting it pretty hard. Friends and neighbors were hitting it pretty hard. Again, it was very deliciously malt forward. It had pleasant hints of like toffee, caramel, some of that toastiness. It was just an absolute joy to drink. It wasn't real bitter. It wasn't real sweet. It was just kind of this nice balance of a Dunkles Bock. And so I thought it was a very excellent and great beer, and I would be happy to brew another one of these and put it on tap.
Well, next time send me one as well, because I would love to try that as well. It sounds delicious. Well, Will, thank you so much for both brewing this beer and then sharing your experiences as well. And as you lived in Germany a bit, I think you actually can speak a German word or two. So you know what? For any of our viewers who are German speaking. I'll let you close the video with a message to them.
Wow. Thanks, Martin. This is really great. My German is just so good. So, yeah, alles clear. Auf Wiedersehen.
Prost!
Prost.